In the past 2 years, I spent over £400 on fixing broken suspension on my car, and I'm not the only one. Quick Fit estimate that motorists spend £1.7 billion a year on fixing pothole damage. Yet fixing roads has suffered from government cutbacks, especially affecting local councils. 62% of local authorities now outsource pothole fixing to subcontractors, who then often subcontract to even smaller firms. It's a piecemeal approach, with each taking a cut. The Asphalt Industry Alliance claim it would cost £17 billion and take 12 years to fix all the British potholes. Yet specialist machines like the Dragon Patcher can fix 150 a day at a cost of £9 per pothole. But there is a big upfront cost, and when you're in penny pinching mode, it's easier to avoid investment and outsource to the lowest bidder. But there's a much bigger problem for government spending. Since 2010, the number receiving health benefits has soared by 40%, yet at the same time reported health conditions have remained relatively stable. True, COVID did cause health problems, but the surge in UK health-related benefits is not mirrored in other European countries. It's really a UK issue. So why is there such a big surge in sickness benefits, which is going to cost upwards of £80 billion in a few years? Well, it is complicated, but the rise in the pension retirement age has put more stress on those who struggle to work later in life. We save on pensions, but pay more on incapacity benefit. Healthy life expectancy has also fallen in many regions in recent years, with average healthy life expectancy in the northwest of 59. Another interesting factor is that less than half of the disabled actually claim disability or incapacity benefits, but this share has been actually rising in recent years. This could reflect the increased cost of living. If you lose your housing benefit or unemployment support, one way to survive is to apply for PIP payments or incapacity payments that previously you hadn't taken up. The UK also has one of the lowest unemployment benefit rates in Europe. Since 2010, real unemployment benefits have fallen 5%. But whilst unemployment and unemployment benefits have fallen, the UK has seen a surge in those claiming sickness and disability benefits. It's a bit like welfare whack-a-mole. You save on some benefits, but then it causes high demand elsewhere in the system. Also, in recent years, there has been a greater awareness of benefits that you can get, perhaps due to social media. You could argue that COVID, the furlough payments and energy price subsidy have all made people more willing to take government benefits. The government plan to means test winter fuel allowance and save money saw a surge in people claiming for means tested pension credit. It ended up costing an extra £200 million. Even this whole debate on welfare reforms is actually causing record new claims for incapacity benefits right at this very moment. Now, you could argue that the underfunding of healthcare is contributing to a rise in sickness benefits, although the IFS state there's little evidence suggests that waiting lists are linked to benefit claims. However, underfunding of basic health systems have arguably caused higher demand elsewhere in the healthcare system, which is more expensive than nipping problems in the bud. Between 2018 and 2022 to 23, local practice funding per patient was £12 lower. In May of this year, 6% of appointments made for your local GP were more than a month after the person made the booking. But the real problem is getting any appointment at all, with many facing that anxious 9 AM struggle to get through. The problem is that if people give up and become undiagnosed, it can become more expensive to treat at a later stage. Every year we do spend greater amounts of money on the NHS, yet why does the service feel more stretched than ever? The Joseph Rowntree Foundation claims the NHS spends £29 billion a year on dealing with the effects of poverty and limited social care. Those who have slipped through the healthcare system are more likely to end up in A&E, needing expensive critical care and then clogging up A&E. A lack of trained staff has caused expensive outsourcing to staffing agencies. A lack of capital investment means extra spending has relatively low productivity. Even routine operations are outsourced to the private sector, a short-term plug which is more expensive in the long term. The NHS is like an emergency service for dealing with some of the costs of society, but it has left very little left over for health prevention, and it's estimated the cost of obesity in the range of 98 billion a year, alcohol consumption 29 billion a year. Now the government is announcing a new strategy for the NHS to do more for health prevention. It is a good idea, a step in the right direction, and the potential benefits are huge. One study suggested that evidence-based preventative health could add 20 healthy days per person a year. But it's not just about the NHS, it's also about making healthy food more affordable, healthy habits, individual choices. Something like the sugar tax was a rare example of a forward-looking policy which raised revenue and caused a decline in the sugar concentration of drinks. But if you're talking about wasting government money, you can't help but return to the HS2, the 230-kilometre, £100 billion railway, one of the most expensive in the world. But it is worth pointing out there was actually a good case for increasing rail capacity. The big problem with HS2 was that ministers at the time wanted to build the best, the fastest, the most impressive railway. If they had a railway which had a lower maximum speed, they could have followed the contours of the M40. It would have been cheaper to build and less disruption. But to make it fast, you had to build it straight. And to build it straight, you had to build expensive tunnels, expensive cuttings, even a £100 million tunnel for bats. And the greatest irony is that this super fast railway is super slow to build. Spain, with admittedly more favourable terrain, has still built 4,000 kilometres high-speed rail at an average cost of 17 million per kilometre, compared to a European average of 45 million and a UK average of 232 million. Partly planning reforms, many of the reasons as well, but just basically very expensive. China's built upwards of 48,000 kilometres of high-speed rail, and we wonder why everything is made in China these days. Now, one of the biggest factors affecting quality of life has been a rise in housing costs over the past 18 years in particular. Social housing sold off, inherited wealth, rising population, high migration, low interest rates. Whatever the reason, higher rents have led to a rise in the housing benefit bill. And expensive housing means more government spending on benefits. But then, in a bid to rein in welfare costs, caps on housing benefit meant that many low-income households struggled to afford to rent anywhere at all. And this has led to the UK having one of the highest rates of homelessness in the OECD. But of course, councils have a legal requirement to provide accommodation, even if that means paying for an expensive B&B. You cut housing benefit on the one hand, and local councils end up spending more on temporary accommodation. Again, benefit whack-a-mole. Now, combined with social care costs exploding because of an ageing population and no specific policy to pay for it, it's no wonder that many local councils fear bankruptcy and, of course, higher interest rate costs on their debt. The government's plan to try and increase house building rates are a step in the right direction, but given the relative backlog of unbuilt housing, it will take many years of building the right kind of housing in the right places to make a serious dent in housing costs. Local councils have often bore the brunt of austerity. Many departments have seen their funding slashed. Yet their job has also been made harder by having to spend more on social care and special needs education. Despite spending over £10 billion a year more on SEND, local councils have still amassed debts of £3 to £4 billion. The number of children diagnosed with special needs has doubled in recent years, but with mainstream schools lacking the finance to support extra care, combined with a legal right for parents to choose their school of choice, it's created a system in crisis. With local councils unable to cope, there's been a surge in private schools, often funded by private equity, providing this specialist education. And to meet legal requirements, councils are spending up to £100,000 a year per pupil. The Times report that local authorities are spending £1.8 billion a year on the private sector, a rise of 300% in just 8 years. It's a familiar story. Underfunding in the mainstream sector leaks out into extra spending on the more expensive private sector. And the whole situation has not been helped by the Treasury, which seems to 3 times a year try to fudge the books to meet with approval of the OBR. It's caused a reflexive cost-cutting process to try to meet the latest change in OBR forecasts or deterioration in finances. So rather than thoughtful long-term reforms to get people back into work, Critics claim that welfare reforms are primarily driven by desire to meet fiscal headroom. I would drop this crazy practice of effectively having to meet almost fictitious targets 3 times a year. Fictitious in that 5-year forecasts tend to be always wrong anyway. And sometimes you do need to invest to save money in the long term. And the final indignity is that the extra spending gets pushed onto the public sector debt, which has been rising in the past 20 years. And since interest rates rose in 2022, the cost of debt interest payments have gone up. So we are in the situation of paying upwards of £100 billion on debt interest payments alone. And who benefits from debt interest payments? Well, it's not the average taxpayer with a large opportunity cost of less spending where we would make a difference. This video goes into more detail on the national debt, what it is, why it's rising, and does it matter? Do check it out because it's quite interesting. All right, thanks for watching. Consider subscribing and lots more videos coming soon, hopefully.